All right. Uh, we're live, Akshat.
Cool. Hi everyone.
Okay, let's just give maybe a few seconds or a minute or so for everybody to tune in.
Yeah, it's my bad. Sorry.
Okay. I think, all right. I'm just double checking. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So we are super excited about it, and Lovers team is doing this for the first time. Hope we will get everything right with respect to the logistics and the demo, and wish the demo gods will be in our favor today. But Akshat, let's get started with the presentation.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so let's just start with a brief, just a couple of minutes of overview of what's Levo. So some of you might know already, but Levo is a proactive API security company. What does that mean? Levo's mission is about helping enterprises to secure their applications, and our philosophy specifically is about securing those applications before they go into production. So we that means like SDLC earlier stages, shift left, DevSecOps, however you see it, we want to help enterprises to take care of the security posture of their applications before they even go into production. And how do we do it? At a very, very high level. Actually, next slide. We help companies to find every API that's there in that company, in your product, in your enterprise, and automatically document them and help you finding the risk posture, help you see the risk that comes from these applications, and then we continuously security test them or automatically test them. You can analogy wise you can see it like automating the pen testing, but we see ourselves more like a GitHub copilot. Essentially our goal is automate the security testing or pen testing that is automatable, let humans do the creative part. So overall, continuously find and discover the risk posture of all of your applications, continuously document them so that you are aware of what is out there. Obviously you cannot secure without knowing what's out there, and then we continuously test them so that you release super secure and battle tested applications into production. So on the discovery side, how do we do it? We started with an approach where we actually look at your API traffic at a very high level. And recently we have been expanding that. But how do we look at your API traffic? We have several instrumentation strategies. We started with eBPF. We pioneered the eBPF technology usage for API security. As far as we know, we were first to bring that into the API security, APIs world. And we also have a packet capture technology, packet PCAP sensor. And recently we have released several other approaches, including API inventory from logs, and also doing discovery from code. This is actually, we haven't even fully announced it yet. It's still in the early stages, but we are giving a sneak peek. And we also integrate with several CDNs, several API gateways. The whole idea is you want to see and know every API that's out there in your environment, and we want to make it as easy as it can get to get the entire list. And We started with the API. It started with capturing the API traffic or looking at your API traffic, but not every API might be active, there might not be traffic. So to expand that coverage, to give the most comprehensive inventory of all the APIs, we have been expanding all the strategies. So now logs, code, and API traffic. We are covering the full ground. And the code, we actually started supporting few languages and frameworks to start with. And we are adding support for other frameworks and languages as we hear about them from customers. And Akshat, next slide. So I think the demo, the topic for today, explicitly, we are starting with Cloudflare Worker. Like some of you might be familiar with the concept of workers in Cloudflare. If you are using Cloudflare as a CDN or content distribution network, all the traffic that is coming into Cloudflare, they give this nice worker concept where you can tap into the traffic and you can actually make a copy and then send it somewhere, or you can even augment the request and do several nice cool stuff. And we built a worker that actually helps to tap into all the incoming traffic into your enterprise through CDN. And we explicitly focus on API traffic there, and using that we are unlocking the full product value of Levo, like all the way from discovery, documentation. We generate open API specs. I think we'll show all that cool stuff in the demo. But why it's so powerful is this installation can be done in just couple of minutes, and you can actually instrument as many applications as you want very quickly, and you will get full visibility, and you can start security testing using Levo all these external API endpoints. it's n- our suggestion is actually to cover internal, external, every API that's out there, but Cloudflare will give a great starter for the external facing or public facing endpoints. So we're starting with this, but we plan to do several more demos in future covering other integrations as well.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, Buchi.
Take over the demo time.
Yeah, let me share my full screen. Uh, yeah, I think you should be able to see my screen now. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to open the Levo documentation and I'm going to follow it to install, to set up the Cloudflare worker in our organization, in my, for a demo app called Crappy. So let's go to the Cloudflare worker documentation at docs.levo.ai. And before we begin, let's look at the prerequisites. So let me quickly open up Cloudflare here and log in. Yeah. So, so if you want to use Levo's Cloudflare worker, the first thing you need to ensure is that you have proxying enabled for your websites on Cloudflare. So for this demo, we're going to be using getlevo.ai.com, and let's go to the DNS settings page, and you'll see here that we have a bunch of subdomains which are proxied. We know they're proxied because of the orange cloud right here. We're going to be using the crappy subdomain, so that's crappy.getlevo.ai.com, and yeah, uh, so we know it's proxied, so that means you can use the Cloudflare worker. The second prerequisite is that you need to have sufficient permissions to create workers and configure routes for your website, which I do. And you need to have a satellite set up and reachable via HTTPS from the worker. So for this demo, we're using a hosted satellite that's hosted by Levo. Uh, but you can also set up your own satellite and expose it to the internet and connect the Cloudflare worker to that. We're not
Uh,
going to go into details
Akshat,
on, yeah,
let me add just one line. So we are introducing the
sure.
word satellite that audience might not be aware. What is satellite? Do you
Hmm.
want to quickly go to that architecture diagram in our docs, the API observability? I
Um,
think we moved it down into the guides, just or search.
okay. Yeah. Is this the one?
Yeah, API observability. Yes.
Okay.
So I think at a very high level, in the mode where we are looking at API traffic to unlock API discovery and continuous security testing for enterprises, we have data capture technology, which is capturing the API traffic. In addition to that, we have one more component, a couple of microservices, completely stateless. We call them as satellite. That runs in customer's environment completely, and we call this as a this is We call this architecture as a privacy preserving architecture. We understand how important customers data is, API data especially. API data will have our customers, end users, PII, sensitive data, and all of that. And it's super important. And our customers usually are concerned like, hey, are we gonna share our data? Like, let's say we are looking at Cloudflare traffic. Your end users, PII, and all of that is coming in the HTTP request at Cloudflare level. Then they will have question usually like, hey, is this data gonna go to Levo's SaaS? Then that naturally makes it a bit more risky, and you are almost like an extended data center now, and several questions open up. To address all these, we have this pretty unique architecture. We call it as a privacy preserving architecture, where this satellite component that runs in your environment, it's flexible. We can host it for customers who don't care about all this, but usually some of our customers host it in their environment. And once we capture the data, that is sent to the satellite, and this satellite is designed in such a way that most of the processing is done there, and the actual data is dropped on the floor there. What comes to Levo SaaS is only the metadata and API specifications. None of your end users data actually leaves your environment. So for the sake of this demo, we are hosting the satellite ourselves on the Levo side, but you can host this satellite completely on your end very easily. It's completely stateless, horizontally scalable, and that keeps all the data in your environment. Take over, Akshat.
Nice. Thanks for that, Buchi. Cool. So yeah, you need to have a satellite setup. Uh, okay, let's get into the weeds. Before we begin, let me quickly remove the worker that I already have for my account. So since we want to set it up from scratch, I'm going to go here and go to manage and delete this. Okay, it's gone. So we don't see a Levo Cloudflare worker here. Okay, now let's get into it. So yeah, okay, let me launch my terminal and I'll go into a temporary directory. Let's create a demo directory and let's run the commands one by one from the documentation. So, so all of this code is open source. It's actually in the code for the Cloudflare worker. It's in the Levo.ai / CF worker repository if you're interested in looking at it. So we clone the repository from GitHub first. Let me cd into the repository. And the next thing we're going to do is install all the JavaScript dependencies. So Cloudflare workers are written in JavaScript, at least this one is. Before I run yarn, let me switch to my latest node version, and I'm going to install all the dependencies for this project. Cool, that's done. The next thing we'll do is authenticate with Cloudflare. So Wrangler is the name of the CLI tool, of the official CLI tool by Cloudflare. It allows us to uh, interact with the Cloudflare API and set up various things in our Cloudflare account. So before we can actually configure anything in our Cloudflare account, we need to authenticate with Cloudflare. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. There we go. Yeah, I want to allow the tool to interact with my account. Cool. We are logged in successfully. Now let's go back to the documentation. And all we have to do now is run this command, which should deploy the worker to our account. Actually, before we deploy it, what we can do is, let me. So Levo has this concept of environments, which allows you to. So, I mean, most organizations have various environments for their application. They have pre-prod, they have staging, they have production, and you can actually so in any of Levo's traffic capture sensors, you can specify an environment, and the traffic that sensor picks up and the applications that are created from that traffic goes into the environment that you specified for that sensor. So what I'm going to do, feel free to add anything, Buchi. Uh,
Yeah,
so what I'm
I
going,
mean,
hmm,
environment concept is generally very familiar to people. Why
hmm,
it becomes super interesting. Actually, we treat environment as a first class concept, and why it's super important in the APIs world, in my opinion, is um, your applications, how active they are, which APIs are being called, which APIs are inactive. Some they change from environment to environment because it depends on the activity that's going on and the testing that is done against. Obviously, production will be the most active because it is being used by end users, but often in non-production, pre-prod or UAT environments, like we are running some tests, integration tests, or QA is running tests. Levo, by treating environment as a first class concept, we are actually clearly showing which APIs are active in which environment, and you will be able to compare across all of these as well. And it opens a bunch of interesting use cases. Like you can actually find all the APIs that are active only in production without ever being active in dev or staging, like that. And in the QA team or the security testing team can directly go to them and say like, hey, seems like we are not covering the testing of all of these in the prior environment, so we can start testing. So that's where the environment actually is super important. So, and even if you are using Cloudflare for like pre-prod environments, so you can actually send the traffic from production and pre-prod into separate environments and keep it separate. While we learn at each environment level, we are also are able to collate them together and show the observations together across both of these environments.
hmm, cool. So yeah, what I'm doing now is I'm setting the environment to demo live because we're in a live demo, and this variable can be set in the wrangler.toml file that's at the root of the repository that I just cloned. So yeah, I've set it to demo live, and now we can deploy this worker to our Cloudflare account. So let's run this command. It's going to ask me to select an account, and there we go. The worker should have been uploaded. Let's wait for the command to complete. Yeah, there we go. Uh, to check that it was uploaded successfully, let's quickly go to the Cloudflare dashboard, and yeah, we don't even need to refresh the page. It's right here, Levo CF worker. So yeah, that's how you install the Cloudflare worker. It's just 5 commands. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Let-
hmm,
Just to add one point
sorry,
there
go
for
ahead.
audience, Akshat,
Yeah.
this is one of the ways of installing Cloudflare workers, and
Hmm,
different organizations might be managing it differently. Essentially, what
hmm,
we are demonstrating here is, hey, here is a simple JavaScript code for the worker, and this is one of the ways in which we can install. Super easy, 3 4 commands, and as long as you have access, you can get up and running in 3 minutes. But if your company is organizing like managing these workers in a slightly different way, typically they will be codified or and probably checked into your repository and all of this. You can just take the worker code from our public repository and get it into your workers list, and you can deploy in the usual way that you might be doing. And other thing that
hmm,
we hear from some customers, we are even helping some customers, other customers, is they might already have existing workers, and we'll work with you. Basically, the existing workers might be doing something else, like adding some extra headers or augmenting the request or response in the Cloudflare itself. In those cases, you can actually, like, we usually work with the customers. We help them merge our worker code into the existing worker that they have, or vice versa. And you have only one worker that's running, but you're still getting both the benefits, like augmenting the request or response that you might be doing already, and forwarding the API traffic to Levo. So you can do that as well.
Hmm. Cool. So yeah, and so we've deployed the worker to our account, but we also need to tell the worker about the organization ID to which it should send the traces to. So that's the next step that we're going to do. Let me copy this command, and I already have this secret as an environment variable, so I'll replace the value with that. And the secret should have been created in the worker in Cloudflare. And that's all. I think that's we don't need to use the CLI anymore. Let's go to Cloudflare now. And the next thing we are going to do is we are going to um, yeah, we're going to add this worker to our domain, to the domain that we want to install it on, and that is crappy.getlevo.ai.com. So let's go there and let's go to worker routes and add a route here. So what I want here is crappy.getlevo.com/star, and let's select the Levo CF worker. So what this means is uh, any request that is sent to this domain that matches this route, uh, that request is going to go to the worker first, and then it's going to go to the domain. So I mean to the origin server, and yeah. So let's do that. Let's add this route. Cool. And yeah, that's all we need to do with Cloudflare. Now let's go to our demo application. Hmm. Let me enter some credentials here.
So
And yeah,
actually, if I just basically I just want to summarize so that everybody is
yeah, sure.
following. So we are taking a demo application. It's an
Mhm.
application called Crappy. Crappy. It's a deliberate vulnerable application. It's part of a WASP organization. It's open source in WASP. Um, so we are just taking that as a demo application, and we have installed Cloudflare Worker already, and we have configured the domain to actually start using that worker. So one nice thing about Cloudflare and workers, and this overall setup that I personally like is you can actually enable disable very quickly. You can add several applications that or you can onboard more applications just with few clicks easily, like, because you don't have to install new stuff. Once you get the worker in, then adding it to any application, however many applications that you might have. Usually enterprises have dozens of applications, and you can actually attach to them very quickly in the Cloudflare dashboard. So we have attached the worker, and now we're actually simulating like the usage of the application, so that Cloudflare actually starts forwarding the traffic to us.
Hmm. So we can generate traffic in two ways. We can either browse around, click a bunch of buttons, which would generate lots of API calls. They should all get picked up by the Cloudflare worker and show up in the Levo dashboard. Or since this is a demo and we don't have a lot of time, we'll go to the API Explorer page on this crappy instance and just make a bunch of API calls for the endpoints we're interested in. So one of those endpoints is this one. Let me send a bunch of requests. So typically, when we install any traffic capture sensor, Levo has some defaults. Yeah. So I mean, we usually have a default of 10 requests. So if the sensor sees 10 requests to one endpoint, it that endpoint should show up in the dashboard. But for this demo, we've reduced that default to just two calls. So I mean, we don't need to make a bunch of calls here. We make a couple of calls and they should show up in the dashboard. Let's go to the Lego dashboard now and switch to the demo live environment, which is already here. There we go. We already have crappy.getlevo.com and we have the dashboard endpoint too. So before we dig into the endpoint, maybe we can go over what each of these symbols mean. What do you think, Buchi?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. Okay, just to explain what happened here,
Yeah.
we exercised a couple of API endpoints from the demo application, and literally in few seconds, Levo has already discovered those API endpoints. Like I think the dashboard, and okay, as Akshat refreshes, you can see several API endpoints that actually got discovered as part of this, and you actually see the icons, especially the globe icon, the PI, and all this. If you look at the dashboard endpoint, uh, you have this dashboard endpoint that we automatically inferred. We ran some heuristics and we are saying that like this is actually the traffic is coming from internet. So we classify whether these endpoints are external facing, internal facing, and all those things. And similarly, the PII icon, if you see, we do detection of PII and sensitive data presence in different API endpoints, which is super important for security teams, privacy teams, because you want to know where all your end users personally identifiable information and sensitive data is flowing, and we detect all of this automatically in real time. And the lock icon is kind of inferring the whether this API endpoint is authenticated. We look at the standard headers and standard authentication schemes and all of that. Based on that, we infer. But even if you have some custom, we will automatically detect that as well. Akshat, can you go into the dashboard endpoint?
Yeah,
So
sure.
the API discovery product, the value that Levo brings, like this screen is one of the very useful and rich information at every endpoint level. You will get like several details about that endpoint. So we are kind of essentially reverse engineering, right? Looking at the traffic and trying to tell the schema, the risk and authentication, and we even do authorization inspection and all of those things. So if you see this is a get endpoint. There is no request, but the response, the schema is inferred already, and we are nicely annotating all the PII fields that are present in this response schema. Nakshad, you want to show the OpenAPI spec? So this is actually
Yeah.
super important. We automatically build OpenAPI or Swagger specs for each and every API. This is like generated in real time, and you look at the details in this, like Akshat, if you scroll up, like we embed
Hmm.
authentication schemes and even PII annotations by leveraging OpenAPI's custom extensions, and we document each and every field automatically, and you can download this spec and you can totally use it. Like this is something that saves tons of effort for developers or even security people. Like you can download this at the individual endpoint level, or you can download this at the entire application level. And we actually have several other nice features around it. Like we host API portal, which becomes a single pane of glass or central point where you can go and check the documentation for any API in your enterprise at any point of time. Like this, that's very powerful, I think. You can call it as a internal developer portal or whatever, but this the schema that we build here with lots of details, we see customers calling it out and getting a lot of benefit from it. So you can take a look at all the internals as well. So the open API spec, and Akshat, maybe
Hmm.
moving to the next one, we also generate postman collections for each and every API automatically, and because we are looking at the traffic, again, this helps developers, QE people, or security people to test these APIs. So these are all the additional value that we actually generate for customers. And Akshat, if you go to the auth and PI, so here we are showing like what is the authentication scheme like, where exactly it's present in the request. And like I said, we infer all the standard or well-known authentications, but we also you can quickly configure if you have any custom headers and all of that, just one-time configuration, and we start observing that automatically as well. We have worked in very complex setups where like they have three or four different headers slash cookies combination that need to be present on the request to get the proper authentication, and we were able to automatically capture all of that in document as well. And the same thing will be used in testing that we are going to show shortly. And if you see that observed roles, like we are even inferring if your application or API has role-based access control and stuff like that, or OAuth scopes, we are inferring them as well. All these details, just like might sound like a lot of details, but they are super important, because I mean 90% of the API data breaches these days are due to authentication or authorization issues, and they all, to stop them, to actually protect your applications against them, this level of understanding is super super important. And the testing need to be aware of all these things, otherwise you cannot do effective security testing of APIs. So that's why we have put a lot of effort, and all of this actually is like it works instantly in real time. Actually, that's why you're able to see all of this in seconds. And I would like to show the change log feature. This is super super helpful. Again, we are all about proactivity. We are all about proactively doing things or helping teams to be proactive, and this is also one such thing where security teams would love to stay on top of the API changes, and it's difficult for developers to notify or keep everybody in the loop for every change. And why should they do it manually, like when we can actually do things like this? So what we did, we automatically look at the API changes as your developers are making them, like any structural change. They add a field, they add a query parameter, they introduce a new API, they introduce a new field that has sensitive details in it. All of those will be automatically version controlled, and you will nicely get notifications in the email, in the Slack, or some of our customers are even piping them into Splunk. So the basically automatically generated API change logs across your enterprise for you by Levo. And finally, the traces. This is just a simple API call or API, the request explorer. Basically, you can see the request response and the context. I'd like to just spend 1 minute. In this Cloudflare's case, probably there is not a lot of context, but if you use our other sensors, the eBPF sensor and all, we bring in all the context that you need to actually understand the real risk this API might have with respect to which microservice it's running. Is it running in Kubernetes or not? Which namespace, which deployment, which and which team owns this? And we plan to actually tie it back to the code as well pretty soon. But is it actually internet facing? Like all those details, so you will have lots of context. Context is a king. Context is king in security world, like as people say. I love that sentence. Uh, the You need a lot of context for this, and in this case, because it's not your microservice or some of our sensors are not running in on your machine, we have less context. But in other cases, you'll have a lot richer context that helps you to triage and prioritize the risks from this API endpoint clearly. Cool. Over to you, Akshat. I think so. That's all on the API discovery and observability side. Like I think
Hmm.
there's lots of rich information available in the screen. And under you, Akshat, do you want to switch to the endpoints tab? Just
Yeah, sure.
yeah. So this, if you see, like you can actually look at the APIs of your entire enterprise. Across the enterprise, you can look at all the APIs. And then actually you wanna show the advanced filters. You will be able to
Hmm.
slice and dice, and you will be able to filter and prioritize the risk from all these API endpoints, or you will be able to stay on top of the most important APIs on several aspects, several dimensions, like whether they are internal versus external, when were they first discovered, what is the authentication, what is the PI, and all those details. So this is how we would
Hmm.
like to help security teams to really stay on top of what they care about, the APIs that deal with the crown jewels, the APIs that possess the highest risk.
Hmm. I'd just like to uh, sidetrack here and and say that one feature that I really like about this screen and is basically the endpoint tags. So you can add any tag that you want to your endpoint. Let's say whatever. I mean, you can add whatever tag you want. And the even cooler feature is that you can tag endpoints automatically. So you can write custom Python functions that allow you to tag endpoints as the traffic capture sensor picks those, sees them. They actually wrote a blog post about this recently. Go and check that out if you find that interesting too. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
classification
Sorry.
is the word that I would say. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
this is very important, and our customers are finding it super useful.
Hmm.
Classification, is like customers want, like, every enterprise is, there are nuances to how they work and what kind of applications they have. Their applications might have some differences unique to that. They want to
Hmm.
classify these APIs sometimes differently from what our product is giving, and customization is at the center of what we build at Levo. Like, we try to give
Hmm.
customization and flexibility to the customer at every level. So the one use case is people. So some of our customers are classifying the APIs that are supposed to be within their VPN versus outside the VPN very easily using these programmable rules and tagging.
Hmm.
Cool. Akshat, let's go to the security
Yeah.
testing in the interest of time.
Yeah. Sure. So what we are going to do is we're going to run some security tests for these two endpoints, or maybe just this endpoint, because, or we can run it for both of them. That's fine. Let's go here and let me quickly go to the parameters page and refresh user data. Okay. Oh, my bad. Before we can test this app, right? Actually, we can run some tests even before. Okay, let
Yeah,
me
let's
take a
let's
step
show
back.
that. Yeah.
Okay. So, usually when you want to test an app, the first thing you would do is add some users because the CLI, Levo needs to know which user to interact with the app as. And if you add multiple users, Levo can do some pretty interesting tests as well. Like one of the tests is BOLA, also known as IDOR, which allows you, which is a test. What that test does is it tries to access one endpoint with another user's credentials. Uh, an endpoint that should be accessible only to the first user, it tries to access as the second user's credential. One very simple example would be your, let's say, you being able to post pictures via someone else's Instagram account. So that would be IDOR or BOLA. But even if if you're running really short on time and you don't want to configure users, you can also go to the traces screen and run tests directly by clicking on the run test button on the traces screen. So and this would allow you to uh, select whatever tests you want and run those tests. So
I'll put it slightly differently. Basically,
okay.
even if Lavos is one API call, we can just
Hmm.
replay that API call and do security testing for you. And in
Hmm.
that replay case, we are reusing the authentication tokens from that call. And the assumption there is the token is still valid. So that means one constraint here is, because we are just replaying the traffic without adding any external user or without getting new credentials, the assumption is that
Hmm.
the token is still valid. So that's what we are talking about. Basically, go to your trace and just replay it and do security testing. But
Yeah.
obviously, that's this is more for interactive and also seeing a quick value. What Akshat was telling
Hmm.
earlier is more of a much more scalable way, where, okay, you just give us a couple of users which are going to be used for security testing, and and that way the authentication and all of that will be automatically refreshed by level.
Hmm. And that's what we're going to do actually. Let's add some users. Uh, we can very quickly add some users here. So we're not going to go into detail about these authenticators, but a very high level overview would be that you can write custom Python code for your application that's specific to your application. So for example, for Crappy, it uses simple you just need to make one API call to this slash identity API auth login endpoint, and that returns a token which we inject in all the requests that we make uh, after this call. So we've already configured an authenticator at the workspace level in advance. So we're going to select that, and we are going to. So what you usually do is you write this login function which returns uh, a dictionary, a Python dictionary, and then you enter a JSON path here. So I'm going to enter that. Let's say this is an authorization header, and let's do that. So we have one user here, but yeah, we also need to enter the credentials, of course. So I'm going to select those, save the user, and since we may be short on time, I'm going to cheat and quickly copy the configuration that I did while testing. So let's go here, copy everything from here. Let's go back to our live environment. What I just did is, whenever you add users on this screen, behind the scenes, it's a simple YAML file, which you can also edit by hand. But uh, I mean, that's not everyone's cup of tea. So we also have a UI to allow you to edit that. But for now, I'm going to copy the YAML file uh, that I generated by configuring the users before this demo, and I'm going to save it here. And you'll see that we have all the users available here.
Yeah, I would like to just again add. First of all, this
Yeah.
is the adding users, especially the authenticator, the Python code is not. It's not required in all the cases. If you have, it all depends on your authentication. But what we are highlighting there is even the very complex authentication can be completely automated with Levo. um, and
Hmm.
that's completely programmable. So I mean, when you can write the code in Python and all of this, then there is no actual limitation. So you can we have automated different kinds of complex authentication mechanisms for customers, even like the cases where we need to load a UI dynamically and and feed in some username password and get the token programmatically and all that. So this again goes back to customization. We care a lot about it because
Hmm.
we understand teams need it.
Hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, uh, so yeah, the thing we have is we are going to run tests. Let's run some tests for this endpoint. I'm going to click on the run test button next to the endpoint. Uh, and yeah, this is the endpoint I want to run. And we have a bunch of tests that you can run. For now, we're only interested in Bola. So let's select that and let's proceed. You can enter the target URL you want here. Uh, there are also some advanced settings which we're not going to get into right now. And let's click on the run test button. So there are two ways of running tests. What I just demonstrated is running tests via cloud. So what that means is that these tests are running on Levos cloud. So all the requests will be made from Levos cloud to the target application. All the requests to the target application will be made from Levos cloud. But if your application is behind, let's say, a VPN, then you can also run via the CLI. You can also use Levo's CLI tool, uh, which is a Docker image. And yeah, you can find more information about that in the documentation. So this test just failed. Uh, Now, yeah, let's click on the test to get more information about it. Uh, so yeah, I mean we have a bunch of details here. We have vulnerabilities here. So it found one vulnerability uh, with a risk level which is high. So yeah, I mean it would be pretty bad if you were able to post or someone else was able to post tweets from your Twitter account, right? So that's what Bola is. The risk level is pretty high. Um,
Hey,
and
you wanna go to the log tab?
yeah, sure.
Yeah, essentially, I think the like what often we hear from customers is to want to test several APIs, like they might have hundreds, and in large companies they might have thousands, but those many APIs for authentication and authorization issues. And we have simplified it so that all of this can be done with a click. If you put Cloudflare, just like we have demonstrated a couple of endpoints, but if there is enough active traffic, you would have hundreds of endpoints. And the same button that Akshat clicked just to run tests, you can just the same button click would run all this the Bola test across hundreds of endpoints. And as you have seen, the scale and automation is the key here. And we found Bola endpoint in this one endpoint, but you want that to be tested as often as you want, and across all of your applications. So that's what Levo is powering. And if you see, finding vulnerability is only half of the game, right? For the security teams, an interesting challenge starts from there. Okay, what is the actual issue? How did you find it? And obviously not every developer might be familiar with some of the security jargon. They want to know how exactly you exploited, or like is this actually exploitable, all those things. So we actually make all the details available, so that there is no friction between development and security teams, and the developers or development team have every detail that they need. If you actually see, we are fully
Mhm.
documenting every API call that is made, and what exactly we are doing. We are first trying to call this API with a normal user authentication as a default request that we said, and we are also highlighting what we changed when we actually did an attack. So whether it is authentication token, parameters, all those things. So you will be able to actually see the differentiation. And we have done all of this in such a way that, especially when we run tests in your environment, we don't even get any of those authentication tokens or details into our cloud. Again, privacy preserving, and taking care of you, like keeping your data as well as authentication secure, is super important for us. So your authentication details and all will be completely kept there. So yeah, you can actually see what was the attack and all these. And basically the developers have all the details, and we have integration with Jira and other ticketing systems, so all these details will be kept in the Jira, so that the ultimate goal is, when you find a vulnerability, there should not be much delay in actually fixing it. And that for that to happen, they need to have all the context around it, and including the ways to reproduce it, so that they can go ahead and like fix it right away. And in the next test run, we'll actually detect that this Bola is actually fixed, if it is fixed. And then we'll be able to tell that like the vulnerability is gone, or risk has gone down on this API endpoint.
Hmm.
Cool. So, okay, I think yeah, it was slightly longer than what we thought, but I think we got into some of the details, and hopefully that gives a lot of clarity and answers questions for audience. All right, with that,
Yeah.
we are open for any questions. Let them come start coming in. All right, I've I'm super curious to see how the questions come in. While we are waiting for questions, like we said in the beginning, this is our first demo and we're just getting started with it. We'd love to demonstrate other features and use cases, and maybe highlight what some of our other customers are using in future demos. If you have any topics of interest, need not be our product feature. If you have any topics of interest in general, if you want to hear from Levo's team, like on how we are doing some of the things, or how some customers are solving some problems in the API space, API security, testing, discovery, visibility, we leverage GBP of and on that, like anything, please feel free to reach to us or put it in the comments, and we would actually cover that in the future demos. Okay, all right. Okay, there is one question. Thanks for the great overview of the features. Other than a blog post, do you have any detailed developer documentation of your product? Yeah, I think what Akshat was showing in the beginning, docs.levo.ai, how docs are public, and there's a lot of information there. And also, we have several of our repositories, like especially the non-sensor based approaches, or non-agent based approaches, like whether it is burp suite extension, zap extension, and all of these, like we have in our GitHub in public repositories. Uh, yeah, if there is anything that you think is not fully addressed in docs.levo.ai, if you have a question, feel free to DM us, and we are happy to share more information. We usually, for some of our prospects, we record a quick Loom video if they have any specific question, and share it as well. Okay, don't feel shy. Ask anything. Is okay. Oh, okay. There's one more question. Is there a trial option to try out the product? Yes, I think. In fact, not we call it as freemium. You can use our entire product for free for up to 100 API endpoints, and that includes even Cloudflare Worker, or any kind of instrumentation for that matter. So if you have less than 100 API endpoints, you can use it for free. We also give it for free for non-profit organizations, and some of those as well, because we- our mission is to help the world to have secure applications, help enterprises to have secure applications. So you can kick the tires without any commitment, with no credit card needed. All we ask is just a business email. Well, I think maybe actually note to us. Probably we should ask people to start putting questions in a few minutes ahead, probably, just so
Hmm.
that we don't have some of these lag. But yeah, I mean, okay, seems like we have done an excellent job. People are walking away without many questions about this. I mean, I would like to have a great day, so that's how I would interpret. uh, but yeah, any other questions? I think feel free to put it on the events page on the LinkedIn page, and or even DM us, depending on the kind of question, and if you want to just discuss in private as well, totally happy to answer. Or you can reach us, buchi@lovo.ai, or info@lovo.ai at any time, if you have more questions. And we have on the website, we have chat as well. Okay. One more question came in. Let's answer it. How many? I think it's how many. That's okay. How many API calls per endpoint we can make in premium? Nope, we don't limit based on that. Um, we don't limit based on the number of API calls. In fact, like Akshat said on the calls, basically we like, so unlike some of the WAFs or detection products, which need to be looking at each and every API request. Because, like, if you think about a WAF, right? If WAF didn't look at one API call or one HTTP request, that itself could have been an attack. And so that means losing one is going to be a game changer in those environments. But Levo, we are about learning about your API behavior, business logic, authentication, authorization. So we don't need to look at every API call. As soon as we see some enough representative, like Akshat pointed, like even 2-3 calls, we are able to unlock a lot. But usually we try to look at like a very small sample of the traffic. So if you have question around like, hey, I have very high volume API endpoints and all of this, we actually do some smart sampling. Even if you are getting millions of API calls, we are not going to look at all the calls. We take a very small sample, and in freemium, we don't limit based on the number of API calls. Hopefully that answers the question. I kind of like this stream yet. Like it's very they really nailed it. I think so you can actually
Yeah.
very
It
conveniently just look at
seems
one screen.
hmm, it seems we have a bunch of viewers on Twitter as well, or X, but they have no way to ask questions there. Maybe we can put out a tweet and ask people to comment below that, and we can monitor that for the next few minutes.
Okay.
If you want to ask any questions, you can also post a comment under the LinkedIn post. Not sure how to share that here, but there's a LinkedIn post on the Levo.ai page, which is streaming this demo. And if you add a comment there, it should be visible to us. Otherwise, I think Buchi can send out a tweet and we can monitor that for a few minutes.
Yep. Thanks, Akshat. Cool. I think okay. We are right on time.
Okay,
Almost just a couple of minutes, but hopefully you all learned something new, and uh, hope you give a try. If you're on Cloudflare, I think it's super easy. You can try it with any of applications, and we have a CloudFront integration as well. We have several other integrations, um, and some of those will be demoing in the future. But like I said, don't hesitate to reach out, or like if you want to see some demo in the future demos, reach out to us. Thank you all. Thanks for spending time with us. Especially, I see some people joining from India as well. Thanks for spending time late in the evening. Have a good day and good night, everybody.
cool. Thank you. Bye.